Every international order eventually reaches a point where it can no longer hide its contradictions. The institutions remain, the alliances still exist, and the old powers continue behaving as if nothing fundamental has changed. But underneath that appearances, the world has already started moving. Welcome to Fourth Floor Post English. This is what I would call a winter of the world. Right now, again. Not because the world has been peaceful before, but because the conflicts that were previously contained by the false order are now being exposed simultaneously. From the end of the Second World War to the collapse of the Soviet Union, the international system passed through one long period of confrontation and exposure. What followed was not the glorious summer, it was another winter in which people simply felt less cold. Now the temperature is dropping again. The central question is geopolitics. In geopolitics is always usefulness. Countries, governments, rulers remain important for as long as they are useful to the prevailing order. Once that usefulness declines, the relationships around them begin to change. An intelligent system anticipates that transition and adopts proactively. The problem today is that almost every major actor is reacting after the change has already begun. The United States is trying to preserve as much of the pre-war Middle East as possible, but that world cannot be recreated because the present confrontation, Arab states could use the Strait of Hormuz without paying America the heavy cost. Imagine now Washington is effectively saying, finance our long-term military presence and we will guarantee your safe passage. Look how dramatically the relationships have changed. The country that once dictated the rules of international system is now offering its services as the paid security provider. It is telling the Arab world that it will guard the strait for them after Trump's own war has made the strait insecure. So why should the Arabs pay America indefinitely when they can negotiate directly with the Iran, which is also a neighbor? And Iran can demand less, offer a political arrangement and reduce the military temperature too around the strait. Because an expanded American presence would do the opposite. It would give Iran another target, compel China and Russia to protect their interest, and transform the strait into either the safest energy corridor in the world or the most dangerous military parking lot in the world. There would be very little space between those two outcomes. Donald Trump appears to believe that he can continuously keep on continuing this pressure until Iran finally collapses or returns to the negotiations on American terms. That is unlikely. America can sustain a military presence for years, I understand, but Iran can also survive the long pressure. The real question is whether Arab economies can sustain the disruption for that long. Iran does not need to defeat America, it only needs to ensure that America cannot restore the previous arrangement. It can accept international pressure, reduce attacks temporarily, and then demand that America should leave the strait. Would Trump leave after spending enormous political and financial capital to establish that presence? Now that will be a bigger question. And if he refuses, the argument will no longer be that Iran alone is preventing normalcy. America will also become an obstacle to reopening the route. The most practical American route right now in this negotiation is therefore not the domination but the cooperation with Oman. Iran attempted from the beginning to bring Oman into the future management of the strait. Oman is different from the other Gulf states because it does not need to American protection. Saudi Arabia and the other Arab monarchies need America to remain connected to their security. In an Oman-centered arrangement, America would need Oman to remain connected to strait. Now, that would quietly rearrange the balance of power in the Middle East and inside the Arab world. It also explains why Washington is struggling to make this decision. Accepting an Iran-Oman framework would preserve some American influence, but it would also acknowledge Iran's regional power, Oman's diplomatic rise, and the end of old American structure. Rejecting it would mean remaining trapped in an expensive confrontation that Trump cannot win. The contradiction is no longer limited to Iran and America, it is appearing within the American system itself. Look at the vice president, second in line, J.D. Vance, criticism of Israel's finances, influence, and criticism of going on with the war. Now, this should be seen as a policy signal, not merely as a podcast controversy. When the American vice president says that Israeli lobbying is pushing Washington towards actions that do not serve American interest, he is not indicating where at least he is indicating where at least part of the Republican establishment wants American policy to move. Marco Rubio is also speaking about the need to end the confrontation and advance negotiations. Now, Trump is moving in opposite direction. That produces two possible conclusions. Either Republican establishment is preparing Israel for the major change in American policy after November, or the confrontation is developing between Trump and his own political camp. In both cases, Netanyahu's present model becomes increasingly difficult to sustain. Israel's strategy depends on keeping America locked into the conflict. Trump's strategies depend on using continuous pressure to force Iran backwards. Iran's strategy is simply to prevent both men, Trump and Netanyahu, from achieving their objectives before the elections happen and politics change in both of the countries. Now, that is the lock currently holding the region. Netanyahu cannot reduce his ambitions without damaging his political survival. Trump cannot accept Iran's new position without admitting that his whole persona has failed. Iran has no reason to rescue either of them through a premature agreement. For Trump, November is therefore more important than any individual military operation. If the Republicans suffer politically, his control begins weakening. If the Democrats gain ground, Washington enters a period of institutional resistance and indecision. And if Trump attempts to delegitimize or delay the electoral process, instability moves from Middle East into the United States itself. Now that would be far more consequential than another limited exchange with Iran. Playing with elections in America, in the biggest democracy of the world. China and Russia would not need to confront America directly then. They could simply allow American political paralysis to weaken American power from within. This is why the whole Middle East order is already loosening. The interest shown by Kuwait, Jordan, and potentially other states in defense arrangements involving Pakistan is part of the movement. These countries are not necessarily preparing one unified front against Iran. They are looking for additional security options because they no longer trust America to provide the entire regional order on its own. Even the Pakistan-Saudi Defense Pact relationship should not automatically be understood as an anti-Iran arrangement. Saudi Arabia has used that relationship to strengthen its own independence. We saw it. We saw it when Saudi Arabia started to resist the use of its territory for the wider war with Iran. How did that confidence come from? So if the arrangements were designed simply to fight Iran, if the Pakistan entrance to Middle East is designed to fight Iran, it would have already been activated when Iranian pressure was at its peak. Now it will not. Because now the Chinese interests are involved and Pakistan cannot go against the Chinese interest. That's a fact. Especially when India is planning for something else, especially when we are in a constant lock with India, because India is a constant aggressor. See, the danger will increase if the conflict expands from Strait of Hormuz to the Bab el-Mandeb. The Houthis have already returned fire after being targeted by the Saudi-backed Yemeni side. If Bab al-Mandeb is seriously disrupted, the pressure on Saudi Arabia and the Arab states to become direct intensify. And at that point, Pakistan will be tested. Pakistan will be asked about its defense relationship, about what its defense pact with Saudi actually mean. Now that is the problem for Pakistan, because Pakistan cannot simply give an answer, because Pakistan cannot logically join either. It can move against Iran when the Iranian border is already sensitive. Look at terrorism happening in Balochistan. Look at the whole western belt. Look at the whole eastern belt. So Pakistan cannot afford it. Pakistan cannot engage Houthis and then claim it remained out of larger confrontation. It cannot. Any direct action would be interpreted as participation in the war against Iran and its regional network. At the same time, Pakistan cannot damage Chinese interest. As I said before, China benefits from the Iran's survival. It's controlled over the strategic pressure points such as Strait, and its resistance to complete American dominance of the energy routes. China and Russia will not allow Iran to be isolated in one against all confrontation. So Pakistan cannot afford it. This leaves Pakistan with the growing importance, but very shrinking freedom of action. Saudi Arabia and the Arab states needs Pakistan. America needs Pakistan to remain connected to its regional arrangements. China expects Pakistan to not undermine the emerging Eurasian balance. Iran does not want Pakistan turned into a platform against it. Meanwhile, India is waiting for an opportunity to present itself to Washington as a useful instrument for containing China and then using that leverage against Pakistan, because Modi is obsessed. So America may try to draw India into the Strait or the wider conflict with the Iran, particularly if European states refuse to become deeply involved. India has already demonstrated transactional flexibility back when its interest around the Chabahar came under pressure. But if Modi moves closer to an American-Israeli strategy against Iran, then China and Pakistan will not sit idle. So, this does not mean that India has found a guaranteed route to the regional dominance. This is only Modi's obsession with viewing the Muslim world through competition with the Pakistan. It has also limited India too. Pakistan may be economically weak, but Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Jordan are still exploring strategic relationships with Pakistan. India possesses the greater economic capacity, yet its closer association with Israel may leave it badly positioned if the region begins to move towards accommodation with Iran. Pakistan's problem is therefore not the lack of strategic value, the problem is whether its internal system is capable of using that value. A country can balance America, China, Iran and Arab world only when it possesses political stability, economic breathing space and a government capable of making strategic rather than personal decisions. Pakistan currently has none of these cushions. The economy is being managed through additional levies over the petrol and recurring pressure on ordinary people with taxes. Political space is almost non-existent. Balochistan and Azad Kashmir are being approached through the same hard state mentality that turns political grievances into security confrontations. At precisely the moment when maximum diplomacy is required externally, maximum rigidity is being practiced internally. The domestic build-up should not be reduced to one conspiracy. Maulana Fazlur Rahman, PTI, the lawyers, movements, the Joint Action Committee, the Balochistan scenario, the changing position of Pakistan People's Party have not necessarily been activated by one command center as a conspiracy. The more plausible explanation is that several actors have independently reached their own enough is enough movement. Pakistan People's Party and Maulana may eventually perform the role of a political bridge, not simply to protect the present setup, but to preserve the old concept of power politics from a complete collision between Imran Khan and the establishment. Maulana creates pressure. Pakistan People's Party searches for leverages, and PTI provides the largest public force. Their routes are still separate, but the environment is steadily pushing towards some form of convergence. PMLN appears unable to recognize this pattern or this change because it is relying on the guarantees that cannot remain permanent. That is exactly how political parties become irrelevant with time. Not because they suddenly disappear, but because they remain attached to a structure after that structure has stopped being useful. The choice facing Pakistan is therefore the same choice facing America. Adapt to the transition or exhaust yourself resisting it. America cannot recreate Middle East that existed before the war. Israel cannot preserve unlimited regional ambitions without permanent American protection. The Arab states cannot continue outsourcing their entire security structure to Washington. And Pakistan cannot protect an old domestic arrangement while expecting to benefit from a new international order. The answer remains in flexibility. Pakistan needs political space at home and strategic balance abroad. It must avoid becoming the hired arm of any regional camp, protect its relationship with China without surrendering its Arab relationships, and use its growing relevance to reduce conflicts rather than enter another one. Because the coming months will not be defined by who appears strongest, they will be defined by the who understands or the who understood first that the world order has or is already gone.